In the heart of a bustling township lived Yemi, a local cultist feared by everyone. He roamed the streets with a swagger, his intimidating presence unmatched. No one dared cross his path, especially the school children and the young girls whom he frequently bullied. Yemi was an illiterate and had no aspiration beyond terrorizing the community. His troubled past was a mystery to most, and he seemed to have no regard for authority or rules of the society. The township had grown accustomed to Yemi's antics, and though many feared him, some pitied him from a distance. But Yemi never allowed anyone close enough to understand the depth of his pain. For him, violence was a shield, hiding the real reason behind his brutal behavior. However, fate had no other plans for Yemi that would soon unravel the dark truth about his past and after the course of his future. One sunny afternoon, as Yemi lounged by the street corner, he noticed a few faces in the neighborhood. A beautiful girl named Ugochi had just moved into the township with her family. Unlike the others, she did not cower at the sight of Yemi. Instead, she walked past him with her head held up, her confidence captivating him. For the first time in years, Yemi found himself intruded by someone rather than intimidating them. Ugochi, on the other hand, was unaware of the effect she had on Yemi. She was focused on adjusting to her new school and making friends, but Yemi could not shake the feeling that there was something different about her, something that drew him in like a moth to a flame. He wanted to know her better, but his reputation made it impossible for him to approach her like a normal person. As days went by, Yemi found himself constantly thinking about Ugochi. His hardened heart began to soften, and for the first time, he felt something that had never felt before: love. It was strange and confusing for him, a man who had built his life around fear and violence. But Yemi knew one thing: he wanted to be close to Ugochi, to win her over, no matter what it took. Yemi tried several times to approach her, but Ugochi always kept her distance. Unimpressed by his tough exterior, she had heard about his violent reputation and was not interested in associating with someone like him. Undeterred, Yemi decided that if he wanted to win her, he had to change his ways. But he had no idea just how much he would need to change. Yemi finally gathered courage to approach Ugochi and confess his feeling. He stood in front of her one day after school, nervous but determined. To his surprise, Ugochi didn't mock him or run away in fear. Instead, she listened to him patiently, then calmly told him that the only way she could ever consider being with him was if he went back to school and got an education. The condition shocked Yemi. He had never set foot into a classroom since he was a child. The idea of going back to school as an adult, sitting with children and teenagers, was humiliating. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that Ugochi was right. If he wanted a future with her, he would have become a better man. The question was, could he really do it? Yemi spent days wrestling with the idea of going back to school. Every fiber in his being told him it was impossible. He was too old, too set in his ways, and too ashamed of his past. But his desire for Ugochi and his growing realization that he wanted more from life than violence and fear pushed him towards a decision. One morning, Yemi stood in front of the township community school, his heart pounding in his chest. With a deep breath, he walked through the gates, determined to start a new chapter of his life. The stares from students and teachers were uncomfortable, but he ignored them. Yemi had made his choice. He would do whatever it took to change. Walking into a classroom for the first time in over a decade was a humbling experience for Yemi. He felt out of place, sitting among teenagers who whispered and giggled about his presence. The teachers too were unsure of how to handle his sudden enrollment, but Yemi kept his head down and focused on learning, driven by his desire to prove himself worthy of Ugochi. His initial days in school were rough. Yemi struggled with reading and writing, often feeling frustrated and embarrassed by his lack of knowledge. But with each passing day, he grew more determined. He wasn't just doing this for Ugochi anymore. He was doing it for himself. He wanted to prove that he was capable of change, that he was more than the thug everyone knew him to be. Yemi's return to school was met with skepticism from the community. Many believed he wouldn't last more than a few days before returning to his old ways. The students mocked him, calling him names and making fun of his struggles with basic subjects. But Yemi had faced worse challenges in life, and this time he refused to let any negativity bring him. Despite the teasing and the difficulty of learning, Yemi kept on moving. He stayed late after school, practicing his reading and writing, and gradually he began to improve. His teachers, initially hesitant, started to see his dedication and offered him support. Slowly but surely, Yemi was transforming, and it was not going unnoticed by those around him. As Yemi continued his journey of self-improvement, whispers about his past began to circulate in the school. No one truly knew why Yemi had become a cultist and a bully in the first place. But as he spent more time in school, bits and pieces of his past began to emerge, shocking the community. Yemi had grown into a broken home, abandoned by his father and neglected by his mother. He was left to fend for himself at a young age, joining a gang for protection and survival. The gang life offered him a sense of belonging, but it also put him into a world of violence and crime. For years, Yemi had suppressed the pain of his childhood, but now, as he worked to better himself, the wounds of his past were slowly being revealed. Yemi's transformation was not without challenges. As he progressed in his studies, he was forced to confront his demons of his past. Memories of his abusive father and his mother's abandonment and the years spent in gang haunted him. There was moments when Yemi felt like giving up, overwhelmed by the weight of his trauma. However, with the support of his teachers and Ugochi's encouragement from a distance, Yemi found strength to keep going. He realized that his past did not define him, and that he had power to create a new future for himself. The more he faced his pain, the more determined he became to leave his old life behind and fully embrace his education. Although Yemi and Ugochi rarely interacted, she noticed his dedication to changing his life. Her initial condition for him to return to school had been a test of his seriousness, and he had exceeded her expectation. Slowly, she began to see Yemi not as a feared cultist, but as a man with potential for greatness. Ugochi started offering Yemi words of encouragement. Whenever they crossed paths, he admired his resilience and his determination to turn his life around. Though she had no romantic feeling for him yet, a bond was beginning to form, one built on respect and mutual understanding. As Yemi continued his journey towards education and self-improvement, the community began to take notice. People who once feared him were now curious about his transformation. Some were skeptical, believing it was all an act, while others were impressed by his newfound dedication. Parents who used to warn their children to avoid Yemi started to see him in a different light. The local leaders even reached out to him, offering support as they saw him as a potential role model for troubled youth in the township. Yemi's story became a symbol of hope, that even the most hardened individual could change if given the right motivation. Despite this new attention, Yemi remained focused on his studies. The determined to complete his education and prove that he was serious about changing his life. Although Yemi had started to make progress, his journey was not without complication. One afternoon, his estranged mother appeared at his doorstep. She had heard rumors about her son's transformation and wanted to see it for herself. Her return brought up old wounds, as Yemi had long resented her for abandoning him when he needed her the most. Their reunion was tense. Yemi struggled with feelings of anger and betrayal, but his mother, tearful, explained that she had left him to escape an abusive relationship. Despite her reason, Yemi found it hard to forgive her. The encounter shocked her deeply, but he realized that facing his family issues was part of his healing process. Slowly, he began to open his heart to possibilities of reconciliation. One evening, as Yemi walked home from school, he encountered the members of his old gang. They had heard about his efforts going back to school and mocked him for it, calling him weak. They tempted him to return to the streets, offering money and the familiar trail of power. For a moment, Yemi was tempted, especially as he remembered how easy life had seemed when he was fed by all. But something in him had changed. The thought of losing the respect he had earned, of disappointing Ugochi, and of giving up his new life stopped him. He walked away, resisting the temptation to fall back into his old ways. It was one of the hardest decisions he had ever made, but he reaffirmed his commitment to his new path. Months passed and Yemi's hard work began to pay off. His reading and writing skill had improved significantly, and he even started excelling in subjects like mathematics and history. His teachers, who once doubted him, were now proud of his progress and often used him as an example to other students. Yemi's academic success was not just personal, it inspired others in the township as well. Parents began telling their children Yemi's story as an example of perseverance. Students who had once laughed at him now sought his advice, and even some troubled teens began following his lead, seeing him in a symbol of hope and redemption. As Yemi continued to change, his relationship with Ugochi also evolved. They started spending more time together, though always in a friendly and supportive way. Ugochi admires Yemi's dedication, and she found herself drawn to his openness and honesty. For Yemi, being around Ugochi was a reminder of why he started this journey in the first place. But over time, his feelings for her deepened. He still didn't know how to express his love, unsure if Ugochi could ever feel the same. But their growing bond gave him hope, and he vowed to keep improving himself, not just to win her, but to prove that she was worthy of love and respect. One evening, during a quiet conversation with Ugochi, Yemi opened up about his childhood. He told her about the abusive father and the neglect he suffered from his mother, and how he had been forced to join a gang for survival. For the first time, Yemi shared the full story of his painful past, revealing the deep scars that had shaped him into a man he had once been. Ugochi listened instantly, her heart breaking for the boy who had been so lost and alone. She realized that Yemi's tough exterior had been a mask hiding the deep wounds of a boy who had never been given a chance. Yemi's openness only deepened her respect for him, and for the first time, she began to see him not as a project, but as someone who could truly care for. Yemi's story touched Ugochi deeply, but their conversation also stirred something into her. As Yemi recounted his past, certain details began to sound eerily familiar to her. She decided to do something digging into her own family history, hoping to make sense of strange feeling that had begun to grow inside her. In the days that followed, Ugochi spoke to her parents. asking questions about her early childhood and family. Her mother, reluctant at first, eventually revealed a secret that would change everything. Ugochi's father had another family before meeting her. This revelation shocked Ugochi in her core, and she couldn't shake the feeling that Yemi might be connected to her in a way she never imagined. Haunted by her discovery, Ugochi sought out Yemi to ask more questions about his family. When she mentioned her father's name, Yemi froze, the shock written all over his face. He hadn't heard the name in years, but it was the name of the man who had abandoned him and his mother. In that moment, both Ugochi and Yemi realized the truth. They shared the same father. The revelation was earth-shattering for both of them. The girl who had inspired Yemi to change, the girl he had fallen in love with, was his half-sister. The weight of this discovery was too much for either of them to bear, and their relationship, once full of promise, was now fraught with confusion and pain. Yemi and Ugochi was both devastated by the truth. Yemi in particular struggled with his emotion. He had spent months working to become a better man, driven by his love for Ugochi, only to find out that she was his sister. The revelation sent him into a spiral of confusion and anger, reopening old wounds he thought he had healed. Ugochi too was heartbroken. The bond she had shared with Yemi, which had started as friendship and grown into something deeper, was now overshadowed by the cruel twist of fate. She confronted her father, demanding to know why he had abandoned Yemi and his mother. His father, overwhelmed with guilt, admitted his mistake, but the damage was already done. The revelation about Ugochi and Yemi's shared father sent shockwaves through the community. Rumors spread like wildfire, and both Yemi and Ugochi found themselves the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. Their classmates and neighbors whispered behind their backs, and even their teachers who had supported Yemi's transformation were now unsure how to handle the situation. Yemi, already struggling with the emotional toll of his discovery, withdrew from everyone. He stopped attending school and retreated to the shadows of his old life. Unsure of how to move forward, Ugochi, heartbroken and confused, didn't know how to reach him. Both of them were left grappling with the painful reality that had shattered their worlds. Yemi's father, who had been absent for most of his life, was forced to confront the consequences of his past. The guilt of abandoning Yemi and his mother weighed heavily on him, and he sought out Yemi to apologize. It was a difficult conversation, one that neither father nor son had been prepared for. Yemi had listened in silence as his father explained his reasons for leaving. He spoke of his regrets and his shame, and his desire to make things right, but Yemi wasn't ready to forgive. The years of pain and loneliness couldn't be erased with a single conversation. Still, the meeting planted a seed of reconciliation, and Yemi realized that healing, though slow, was possible. After weeks of isolation, Yemi made the decision to return to school, and despite the painful revelation about Ugochi, he didn't want to throw away everything he had worked for. His teachers welcomed him back, though the tension in the air was palpable. Ugochi too had been waiting for Yemi's return. She knew their relationship could never be the same, but she still cared about him and wanted him to succeed. Slowly, the two began to rebuild their friendship, though the love that they had once blossomed between them was now replaced by a deeper, more complicated bond, one of the shared history and forgiveness. Ugochi, with the truth about their shared father out in open, Yemi and Ugochi to navigate their relationship in a way. It wasn't easy, but they were both determined to move forward. Yemi threw himself into his studies once more, determined to finish what he had started. He knew that his future depended on it. Ugochi too found solace in her studies, the revelation of her father shaking her, but it had always given her a new sense of purpose. She realized that life was full of unexpected twists and turns, but what mattered was how you choose to respond to them. Together, Yemi and Ugochi supported each other as they worked towards their shared goal of graduating.